Hello, I'm Dr. Sequita Sweet in the Organizational Leadership Doctoral Program at Stockton University. In this video, we will explore various issues of diversity and racism. We will look at some trends in organizations as it pertains to diversity. We will also discuss race and racism in the context of the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Classroom by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. Thinking about and discussing issues of race and racism evoke a variety of strong emotions and anxieties. Some people are fearful and enter these discussions with trepidation. Some enjoy the discussion and feel free to express themselves. Let's set the tone for watching this video, thinking about and having discussions about racism. Consider now what feelings and emotions discussions of race evoke in you. What do you typically do amidst these discussions? Then, despite these emotions, why are these conversations important to have, particularly as it relates to leadership? And finally, what might be a goal or set of goals or desired outcomes as we enter this discussion? If you're in a doctoral cohort at Stockton, remember the group norms you've developed. Now pause the video and take a moment to reflect on and address these questions. You may just reflect by thinking, but it may be helpful to write or type your reflections and thinking to save and read at a later time to support your growth and development in this crucial area. There are several developing trends in diversity in the United States as can be seen in the following context. First, there are three generations of workers in the workplace. People are working till much older in the 21st century. The numbers of Hispanic and Asian workers are increasing exponentially. Women are outnumbering men in the workplace, but often not in leadership positions. There is a growth of foreign-born population. And finally, there is a continuing lack of African Americans at higher levels in organizations in all disciplines. Thus, the calls and demands to diversify workplaces are louder and more prevalent than ever before. Though the text that is referenced is 10 years old, these trends are still quite relevant and continuing. It helps us to understand the enormity of making changes uh, in people and people's thinking in organizations. So, what is diversity? Diversity is all the ways in which people differ, but we must understand that a diverse workforce poses unique challenges. Employees with different backgrounds bring different opinions and perspectives and ideas, which may lead to conflict, anxiety, and misunderstandings. While organizations must diversify, they must also address and manage issues of conflict, anxiety, and misunderstandings, along with the important issues of equity and inclusion in the workplace. Since diversity in the workplace allows the introduction of multiple perspectives, ideas, thinking, and voices to reach problem solutions, there are some inherent benefits to workplace diversity, which include better use of employee talent, increased understanding of the marketplace, enhanced breadth of understanding in leadership positions, increased quality of team problem solving, and finally, reduced costs associated with high turnover, absenteeism, and EEOC related lawsuits. We must understand that we all have biases, and we must continually examine our underlying assumptions and thinking to call those biases and prejudices into question. Here are some relevant definitions relating to bias. Pause the video now and take a moment to review these important definitions. Some further definitions relating to shaping personal bias are listed here. Pause the video now and take a moment to review these definitions. A final list of diversity-related definitions are listed here. Pause the video now and take a moment to review these definitions. There are numerous approaches and possible steps to effectively managing diversity in the workplace. Most importantly, though, organizations must be willing to uncover diversity problems in the organization, strengthen top management commitment, choose solutions that fit a balanced strategy, demand results and revisit goals and outcomes, and finally, maintain momentum to change the culture. Pause the video at this time to review this short list of diversity initiatives and programs that can be undertaken in organizations to support diversity management. Let's move into thinking about all the ways in which we are different. Pause the video and take a moment to write down 5 characteristics that describe who you are, meaning the top 5 things you think of when you think to describe yourself. Note the 2 diversity wheels adapted from Loden and Rosner and titled Dimensions of Human Diversity. The wheels depict the many ways in which we as human beings are different. We all have different personalities in the middle of the wheel. The next level is internal differences, things we can't typically change about ourselves. Note the slight difference on the 2 wheels at this level. As we move outward, externally on the wheels, the differences are external, organizational, and time-bound. Now pause the video and locate the characteristics you used to describe yourself from the previous slide on either or both diversity wheels. Consider how you identified yourself and what you noticed when you tried to put your characteristics into the areas of each of the diversity wheels. Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum helps us understand race and racism as we develop our racial, ethnic, and cultural identity through these lenses. The book provides important context on how we, from an early age, develop our thinking and concepts of race and ultimately ourselves. The book is especially helpful to parents raising children, no matter what race or ethnicity, to help them traverse the racial challenges as they develop their identity. Dr. Tatum is adept at helping us deconstruct and reconstruct issues of race and racism for practical use in our lives. Not excluded are how we, including and especially white folks, must shift our self-concept and learn how to have more productive conversations regarding race, despite being uncomfortable and challenged, so that healing can be achieved. As we delve into the chapter of each chapter of this book, you should have a copy of the book available to you to turn to specified pages being discussed so that you can connect with and gain more context of the material. As we traverse the chapters of the book in this recording, remember to consider pausing the video to take time to reflect and address the questions posed. Chapter 1 helps us understand racism and the psychological impacts of racism on whites and people of color. We begin to see how children are affected by racism in their formative years. In Chapter 1, the author writes, "Prejudice is one of the inescapable consequences of living in a racist society. The cultural images and messages that affirm the assumed superiority of whites and the assumed inferiority of people of color is like a smog in the air. Sometimes it is so thick it is visible, other times it is less apparent, but always, day in and day out, we are breathing it in. None of us would introduce ourselves as smog breathers, and most of us don't want to be described as prejudiced. But if we live in a smoggy place, how can we avoid breathing the air? If we live in an environment in which we are bombarded with stereotypical images in the media, are frequently exposed to ethnic jokes of friends and family members, and are rarely informed of the accomplishments of oppressed groups, we will develop a negative characterization of those groups that form that form the basis of prejudice. It's on page 86. Uh, Take some time now, pause the video, and take a moment to reflect on and address these questions. Many people use the terms prejudice and racism interchangeably, but the author says it is important to understand that they are not the same. Prejudice refers to individual attitudes, but racism is better understood as a system of advantage based on race, a system involving cultural messages and institutional policies and practices that operate to the advantage of white people and to the disadvantage of people of color. See page 87. These policies and practices are so well established and ingrained in American society, the system of advantage can continue to operate even in the absence of overly prejudicial thinking. Take a moment now to pause the video and reflect and address these questions. On page 91, the author uses the analogy of a moving walkway to illustrate the ongoing cycle of racism and to distinguish between active racist behavior, passive racist behavior, and actively anti-racist behavior. Take a moment to answer the questions as you pause the video. On page 93, the author asks, why should whites who are advantaged by racism want to end that system of advantage? What are the costs of that system to them? How would you answer these questions? Chapter 2, The Complexity of Identity, helps us delve into and understand the difficulties we have at an early age in developing our identity. The concept of race complicates this ability even more so. Dr. Tatum explains that our sense of identity is largely shaped by our social interactions with others. Some dimensions of our identity are likely to be more salient to us because of the history of interactions we've had. Similar to an exercise we did earlier, in 60 seconds, using as many descriptors as you can think of, complete the sentence, I am, and fill in the blank. After you've done that, what do your answers say about which part of your identity are most important to you? Take some time, pause the video, and reflect to address these questions. There are at least 7 categories of otherness commonly experienced in U.S. society. People are commonly defined as other on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, including gender expression, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, and physical or mental ability. Each of these categories has a form of oppression associated with it: race, racism, sexism, religion, oppression, anti-Semitism, heterosexism, classism, ageism, and ableism, respectively. In each case, there is a group considered dominant, systematically advantaged by the society because of the group membership, and a group considered subordinate or targeted, systematically disadvantaged. When we think about our multiple identities, most of us will find that we are both dominant and targeted at the same time. But it is the targeted identities that hold our attention and the dominant identities that often go unexamined. When we think of and discuss diversity, we typically think of it in terms of race. However, in addition to the considerations of race, we must begin to consider all the ways in which we are privileged. We are all privileged in some way. In the United States, you can see here that we fall into the dominant groups listed. We enjoy a certain level or amount of privilege that cannot be ignored. We must reckon with that privilege and understand how it affects our behaviors and actions towards others and in the decisions we make. We must recognize the perceptions we have developed and call into question the actions and behaviors that those perceptions cause. We must recognize that the power we have in certain circumstances and become more acutely aware of how we behave as leaders with this privilege. Pause the video now and review the dominant groups and where you might be targeted, and then understand or answer the questions on the right side of the screen. Chapters 3 and 4 address issues of race in the early years and identity development in adolescence, respectively. I don't address topics in these areas, but they are useful for understanding what your children are experiencing as they are socialized at school and in other contexts. If you have young children, you should absolutely read these chapters. Chapter 5 addresses racial identity in adulthood, helping us understand that identity development does not stop at adolescence, but continues all through our lifetime. The process of racial, ethnic, and cultural identity development, often emerging in adolescence and continuing into adulthood, is not so much a linear as a circular process. It's like moving up a spiral staircase. As you proceed up each level, you have a sense that you have passed this way before, but you are not exactly in the same spot. Moving through the immersion phase of intense and focused exploration into internalization of an affirmed or and secure sense of group identity does not mean that there won't be new and unsettling encounters with racism or the recurring desire to retreat to the safety of one's same race peer group, or that identity questions that were resolved won't need to be revisited as life circumstances change. Pause the video now and take time to reflect and answer the questions on the right side of the screen. Chapter 6 addresses the development of white identity and its challenges. This chapter helps white people and all of us understand the challenges white people have about race and racial norms in America. Discussion regarding the psychological discomfort that exists among white folks and the hidden costs of racism are explored. In her memoir, Waking Up White, Debbie Irving recalls how she thought about her own racial identity until at age 48 she woke up white, an awakening that came in the context of an academic course she was taking. Irving explains, the way I understood it, race was for other people, brown and black skinned people. Don't get me wrong, if you put a census form in my hand, I would know to check white or Caucasian. It's more than that I thought of thought all these other categories like Asian, African American, American Indian, and Latino were the real races. I thought white was the raceless race, just plain normal, the one against which all others were measured. See page 186. Take a moment and pause the video and reflect and answer the questions on the right side of the screen. While the task for people of color is to resist negative societal messages and develop an empowered sense of self in the face of a racist society, counseling psychologist Janet Helms says the task for whites is to develop a positive white identity based on reality, not on assumed superiority. In order to do that, each person must become aware of his or her whiteness, recognize that it is personally and socially significant, and learn to feel good about it, not in the sense of a Klan member's white pride, but in the context of a commitment to a just society. See page 186. And pause now and answer the questions on the right side of the screen. There is a history of white protest against racism, a history of whites who have resisted the role of oppressor and who have been allies to people of color. Unfortunately, these whites are often invisible to us. While the names of active racists are easily recalled, past and present Klan leaders and Southern segregationists, for example, the names of white allies are often unknown. Pause now and answer the questions. The last chapter we'll cover in this video is Chapter 7, White Identity, Affirmative Action, and Colorblind Racial Ideology. Chapter 7 addresses whiteness in the context of affirmative action. Whether we consider measures of housing, education, the labor market, the criminal justice system, the media, politics, or healthcare, whites as a group fare better than just about every other racial ethnic group in the United States on measures of access, participation, and success. Yet recent national surveys indicate that 50% of white Americans believe that discrimination against whites has become a problem equivalent to that against people of color. See page 211. Why do you think so many white people hold this belief despite the data on persistent racial gaps on measures of social and economic well-being? Pause now and answer this question.